Deep in the dark water behind every dam, there are structures you never see. Intake towers, diversion tunnels, submerged gates. When something goes wrong down there, they send down divers. Men and women who drop into the cold black with a flashlight and a tether, trusting that the concrete walls are all that's watching them. But sometimes the walls have doors, and they aren't all closed. Welcome to True Terror Files Official. Inland commercial diving is one of the most solitary and dangerous jobs in the world. You're lowered into water so murky you can't see your own gauges, into massive concrete structures built decades ago. Designed to channel thousands of gallons per second, the work is grimy, the pay is decent, and the psychological toll of working in utter blackness at depth is something you either learn to manage or you wash out. But the divers who stick with it all agree on one thing. Every old reservoir and intake has a story. A hatch that shouldn't be open. Noise that shouldn't travel through water. A shadow that shouldn't be moving against the current. Tonight, 3 professionals who work in the dark waters share the dives that changed them. A diver in a mountain reservoir in Colorado who found that an old intake hatch had been opened from the inside. An ROV pilot in West Virginia who picked up a sonar contact inside solid rock. And a maintenance worker in New York who climbed down a drained shaft and found a door that no one had opened in 50 years, except everything inside was wet. Strap on your tanks. We're going under. Torrin Landry had been doing underwater inspection for 7 years, mostly for municipal water authorities, and the Morse Lake job was supposed to be routine. The intake tower was a concrete monolith built in 1954, drawing water through 3 submerged gates at depths of 40, 70, and 110 feet. The upper gates were fine, but the lowest one had stopped reporting position, and the water district needed to know if the hydraulic ram had failed or if the gate itself was jammed. Torrin suited up, checked his cums and his tether, and dropped into the green-black water with a primary light and a backup. The descent was slow and cold. By the time he reached the ledge outside the lowest gate at 110, the water temperature had dropped to 41 degrees, and the visibility was maybe 8 feet. The gate was a massive steel rectangle set into the concrete, partially open, the dark slot of the intake shaft yawning behind it. He moved closer. The hydraulic ram was extended, the gate stuck at about 30%. That should have been it. He made a note and started to turn away. Then his light caught something else. A smaller hatch, set into the concrete wall beside the main gate, about 3 feet in diameter. It was open, not just unsealed. The dogs were thrown back, and the heavy steel disc was hanging on its hinge, swaying almost imperceptibly in the current. That hatch had been sealed since the tower was built. There was no record of it ever being accessed. Torrin's supervisor, a voice crackling in his ear, asked him to investigate. He swam closer. The open hatch revealed a narrow tube, concrete-lined, just big enough for a man to crawl through. He shone his light inside. The beam illuminated the curved walls, covered in a thick brown biofilm that waved like hair in the current. The tube went back about 20 feet and then turned downward into darkness. And on the wall, just inside the hatch, were handprints. Human handprints pressed into the biofilm, the grease from someone's palms leaving dark impressions. Torrin reported them. Supervisors suggested maybe a previous inspection crew had left them. Torrin knew better. The handprints were on the inside of the hatch, not the outside. Someone had closed it from within. He started to back away. That's when he heard it. Through the water, a sound that vibrated in his chest, metallic banging, slow and rhythmic, coming from deep in the tube. Boom, boom, boom. And then a voice, distorted by the water but comprehensible. transmitted through the steel and concrete. The gate's still stuck. Don't open it. It's holding them in. Torrin's blood ran ice. He keyed his mic. I've got a voice down here. It's coming from inside the tube. Can you verify? His supervisor asked him to repeat. He did. The voice came again, louder now, almost frantic. You're out there. I can hear your bubbles. Don't open the main gate. We'll let them through. They've been knocking on this side for 40 years. Torrin looked at the main gate, the massive steel panel stuck open just enough for a body to squeeze through. The black slot beyond it was absolutely still, and then he saw it. Something moved in the slot. A pale shape, long and thin, sliding past the gap like an eel. Then another, then a hand. Torrin didn't wait, kicked backward, grabbed his tether, and pulled the emergency ascent, signal 3 sharp tugs. The crew above hauled him up so fast his ears nearly burst. He broke the surface, gasping, and scrambled onto the dive platform, tearing off his mask. He told the water district supervisor that the lower intake was structurally unsound and should be permanently sealed. He never mentioned the handprints, never mentioned the voice, but he researched the tower later. In 1966, a maintenance diver named Harold Ketchner was sent down to inspect the same lower gate. His tether was cut. His body was never found. The official report said his equipment failed and he was swept into the intake. But Torrin wonders, what if Harold Ketchner didn't get swept in? What if he crawled into that auxiliary tube to escape something he saw coming through the main gate? What if he's still in there, still holding the hatch closed, still warning anyone who comes close? Torrin retired from diving 2 years later. He works as a welding inspector topside now. But sometimes, when he's near a lake and hears the sound of water lapping against concrete, he hears that voice, still holding, still waiting. Priyanka Desai was an ROV pilot for a geotechnical firm contracted by a hydroelectric company to map an abandoned coal mine that had flooded, needed to be assessed for a pumped storage project. The mine, known as the Sullivan Deep, had been closed in 1941 when the coal seam played out and the lower levels flooded from a breached aquifer. The shafts had been sealed and no human being had been inside since. Priyanka's job was to guide a tethered ROV down Borehole 9, a ventilation shaft that had been drilled into the upper level of the mine. It mapped the cavities to see if the rock was stable enough to hold water under pressure. She was in her Elementa dark control trailer, the hum of electronics, the screen showing the ROV's camera feed as it descended through black water. The shaft was narrow, the walls rough-hewn rock, the visibility limited to about 10 feet by suspended silt. She piloted carefully, reading the depth gauge. 100 feet, 200, 300. At around 400 feet, the shaft opened into a larger void, the upper gallery of the mine. The ROV's lights illuminated a scene of rusted rail tracks, a collapsed timber set, the skeleton of a mine cart half buried in mud. Priyanka directed the ROV to pan slowly across the gallery. That's when the sonar registered a contact. The screen showed a solid object, roughly man-sized, about 40 feet ahead, just beyond the camera's visual range. She nudged the ROV forward. The sonar contact moved. Not with the current, the water was still. It moved deliberately, gliding to the left and disappearing behind a fallen pillar. Priyanka felt a chill that had nothing to do with the trailer's air conditioning. She keyed her mic. Control, I've got a moving contact down here, sonar only. Could be a large fish, but at this depth and this location, that's unlikely. Her supervisor's voice came back. Probably debris. Keep mapping, she continued. The ROV's camera swept across the gallery, and then her screen flickered. A burst of static. When the image cleared, the ROV's spotlight was illuminating a face. It was right in front of the camera lens, inches away, the face of a man. It was pale, bloated, the eyes milky and wide, the mouth stretched into a grin that showed blackened teeth. The ROV's audio feed, which was designed to pick up only ambient noise, crackled and whispered, "You're the first to visit. We've been so lonely. The water rose and we couldn't get out, but we're still here. Want to see the crew?" The face pulled back. The ROV's camera showed a wider view. Behind the single figure in the darkness beyond the spotlight were more figures. Dozens. Standing in the water, their heads just above the surface, their pale faces turned toward the ROV's light. They were wearing old miners' clothes, canvas pants, suspenders, cloth caps. Some still had their carbide lamps attached to their helmets, the brass reflectors glinting. One of them, the one who had spoken, raised a hand and waved. "Come deeper. The foreman wants to talk to you." Priyanka's training screamed at her to cut the tether and retrieve the ROV instead. She sat frozen, staring at the screen. The figures began to move. They walked through the water toward the ROV, their movements slow and deliberate, the water barely rippling around them. As the audio feed crackled again, and a new voice, deeper, more resonant, spoke. "This is the foreman. You're trespassing in Sullivan Deep. This mine is still under contract. We were never discharged. The company left us down here when the shaft flooded. You owe us back pay." Priyanka hit the emergency retrieval. The ROV's thrusters whined, pulling it upward. On the screen, the figures watched it go. The last image before the camera broke the surface was the foreman, raising a hand in a mock salute. Priyanka sat in the control trailer, shaking, the retrieved ROV dripping water on the floor. She told her supervisor the shaft was structurally unsound and the mine was too unstable for the project. She didn't mention the miners. She didn't mention the voices. But she looked up the Sullivan Deep disaster later. In November of 1941, a sudden inrush of water from the abandoned workings above flooded the lower levels. 34 men were trapped. The company tried to pump out the water for 3 days, but the influx was too great. They sealed the shafts and walked away. The miners were never recovered. Priyanka still works as an ROV pilot, but she never takes jobs in abandoned mines. And sometimes, when she's piloting a unit through dark water and the sonar registers an unexplained contact, she thinks about the foreman's salute. She pulls the ROV back a little faster. Frankie Usen had been a maintenance lead at the Cassadaga pump storage facility for 5 years. She'd never been afraid of the water. The facility used a deep vertical shaft 200 feet from top to bottom to draw water from a lower reservoir and pump it to an upper reservoir during off-peak hours. Every few years, the shaft had to be drained for inspection, and Frankie was the one who climbed down. This time, when the shaft was drained and the lights rigged, she descended the metal ladder bolted to the concrete wall, her boots echoing in the massive cylindrical space. The bottom of the shaft was a concrete floor with a massive intake grate in the center, through which water normally flowed. One corner of the grate was lifted, and beneath it, a spiral staircase led down. Frankie stared. There was no staircase on any schematic. The shaft ended at this floor. She radioed up to her supervisor. He told her to stay put while he checked the drawings. While she waited, she shone her light down the staircase. The steps were wet, slick with algae, and they descended into a darkness that her beam couldn't penetrate. From somewhere down there she heard water, not dripping, flowing. A steady, rhythmic surge, like a bellows breathing. And then a voice, a woman's voice, echoing up the stone steps. "The turbine's cold. Did you come to start the pumps? We've been waiting." Frankie's heart lurched. She keyed her radio. "I've got a voice down the staircase. Who is this?" Her supervisor came back, confused. "There's no staircase, Frankie. The drawings don't show anything below the grate. Must be an old access that got sealed over. Don't go down." The voice came again, louder now, closer. "Please, it's so dark. The water's been up and down for years and we can't sleep. Just start the pumps. You can drain us out." Frankie made a decision. She stepped through the lifted grate and started down the spiral stairs, her flashlight illuminating the wet concrete. The air grew colder, heavier, thick with the smell of old water and something metallic. The stairs ended in a circular chamber. The chamber was half flooded, the water black and still. In the center of the chamber, rising from the water, was a turbine. Old, rusted, its blades caked with sediment. And standing in the water around the turbine, their upper bodies, just above the surface, were figures, a dozen of them. Dressed in old work clothes from the 1940s, their faces were pale, their eyes dark hollows. They turned as one when Frankie's light hit them. One of them, a woman with her hair plastered to her skull, spoke. "You came down? Nobody ever comes down? We've been trying to clear the intake since the collapse in '44. We couldn't get out. The water came up so fast, Frankie couldn't move." The woman gestured at the turbine. "We tried to keep it running. The pumps failed. We just need someone to start the emergency drain. Then we can go home." Frankie found her voice. "What is this place? What happened here?" The woman's expression shifted to something like sadness. This was the original pump chamber. They built the new shaft over it after the accident. They said it was too dangerous to recover us. They just left us. Frankie backed toward the stairs. The figures in the water began to move toward her, their hands reaching out, the water rippling. The woman spoke again. "Wait, please. Just start the pumps. It's been so long." Frankie ran up the stairs, her boots slipping on the algae, and scrambled through the grate. She slammed it shut and spun the bolts tight with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She climbed the ladder to the surface and told her supervisor that the shaft floor was unstable and needed to be permanently sealed. She never mentioned the staircase. She never mentioned the chamber. She never mentioned the workers still waiting for the pumps to start. But she researched the facility later. In 1944, during the original construction of the pumped storage project, a temporary pump chamber was flooded when a cofferdam failed. 11 workers were trapped. The company determined that the chamber was structurally unsound and sealed it, burying the workers alive in the water. A new shaft was built directly over the old chamber. The blueprints altered, the accident erased from the records. Frankie still works at the Cassadaga facility. She walks past the sealed grate every day. Sometimes when the pumps are running and the water is churning, she swears she can hear voices echoing up from below. Still waiting, still hoping, still asking for someone to start the drain. 3 dives, 3 descents, and 3 encounters with the things still moving in the dark water. Torrin Landry found a diver who'd been holding a submerged hatch closed for 40 years, warning anyone who came close that something was on the other side. Priyanka Desai piloted an ROV into a flooded mine and found a crew still waiting for back pay, still walking through the water with their carbide lamps glinting. And Frankie Usin discovered a staircase that wasn't on any schematic, leading down to a chamber where 11 workers had been waiting since 1944 for someone to start the pumps and let them go home. The water infrastructure is still out. Their intake towers, drain shafts, flooded mines, all of them dark and cold and filled with secrets. But the next time you see a reservoir or a dam and you wonder what's beneath the surface, remember, some of those structures were built on top of older ones, and some of the workers who built them never left. This has been True Terror Files Official. If you've ever worked underwater, piloted an ROV, or descended into a submerged structure and seen something you can't explain, we want to hear from you. Drop your story in the comments. We read every single one. Like, subscribe, ring that bell. And if you ever find yourself floating in dark water with a flashlight aimed at a hatch that shouldn't be open, maybe just swim the other way. The water keeps its secrets, and it doesn't give them back.